Hello, everybody, and welcome in Speaking Seagulls, the premier Pennsylvania pro football podcast. I'm Nick Bate. He's Ricardo Martinez-Baz. We have a fun episode coming today. It's the draft preview. Everybody loves talking about the draft. Honestly, one of the best times of the NFL calendar. I like it more than NFL free agency just because you're learning all these new young players that could potentially be future studs or stars of your team. So it's going to be an exciting time. We've got some other Eagles news that we'll break down, so it should be a fun episode. But first, Ricardo, I ask you, how you doing today, my friend?
Pretty good, man. A little under the weather, but we're getting past it at this point. The worst is gone past.
Wow,
I'm
twins,
excited.
dude. I actually woke up with a sore throat yesterday, and I've just kind of been milking it the last 2 days.
Oh,
So,
great! That's
yeah,
boy.
yeah.
Excited to talk. All things draft. Great time for sports generally. Baseball back up. Your Yankees are killing it right now.
Oh, yeah, they are.
Holy hell, dude! They're doing so well. But I mean that's freaking another time. But yeah, no, it's great, man. How you doing?
Good, man. Good. Doing well. College basketball also just came to an end yesterday. Shout out
Yeah,
UConn for winning.
again.
And NHL and NBA playoffs are right around the corner. So definitely an exciting time. Not to mention the Masters this weekend, which is
Yeah.
honestly one of my favorite weekends on the sports calendar. So it's a busy time in sports. And the draft is obviously very much at the center of that, too, because the NFL always dominates. So we'll have a lot of fun diving into that today, as it's, pretty much 2 weeks away. It's this upcoming Thursday will be 2 weeks prior. So this is the time where everything's kind of getting locked in, and teams are really kind of finalizing their draft boards, and we'll try to talk about what we expect to happen for the Steelers and Eagles. But first off, we got some Eagles news to break down. Not a lot happening for the Steelers right now outside of the draft, but the Eagles making some moves since our last episode. I guess the big news we got to start with is Haason Reddick getting traded, and I think this was something, Ricardo, you kind of felt might have been inevitable, especially if they didn't get the deal restructured and extend him or whatever. So here we are. Haason Reddick is now a New York Jet. What are your initial takeaways from this?
Well, so the trade detail was a 2026 conditional third rounder that could turn into a second based off of a very specific number of snaps played, like 67.5%. It was something like that. Which I think he should hit. But even that to me seems like not enough. I said at least like the Eagles should be getting maybe a second rounder. Not necessarily a conditional pick, but like I guess it could in theory work out that way anyway. But like still, that's also a pick that's not even next year's draft. That's the year after. So on that front, maybe the Jets kind of won that trade because Reddick's still a very productive player, productive edge rusher. And essentially, it's kind of Bryce Huff in return for Haason Reddick, if you want to look at it that way. But now, I mean, the Eagles have to be more reliant on Huff, obviously, who they just signed. They're betting on his upside. I believe he's only turning 27, Bryce Huff. And then Nolan Smith, obviously, the first rounder from last year, is going to have to take another step in his developmental stage. So I'm not too concerned necessarily. I'm just a little, it's kind of betting on upside, betting on development because Huff is more of a straight rushing the passer sort of player. Third down, or sorry, not great against the run. Nolan Smith might have to take those snaps, but I mean, it was going to happen, like you said. It was inevitable because I mean, they pushed back his roster. I can't remember what the exact wording of that was. Something about some bonus that got pushed back till March 31st, and then they eventually got the trade done a couple of days before then. So it just once they signed Huff, and then restructured Josh Sweat's deal as well. You just kind of had the feeling it was Reddick out the door, which kind of sucks too because he's a Philly guy. And it just, I mean, he's not that far away, but still, they're losing one of the most productive pass rushers, the last few seasons. But I
Yeah.
mean, it could be worse, I guess. But I kind of expected a little more in return for him. But
I mean, yeah, right now, I mean, he's a top 10. I don't think it's outlandish to say he's still a top 10 edge rusher in the NFL.
yeah,
And that's what you're giving up in hopes that Bryce Huff can put up the numbers. It's almost like they're kind of filling his role by committee of Bryce Huff putting up the numbers rushing the passer, and you'll get a step from Nolan Smith, who will be in there rotationally to also get to the quarterback, but like you said, kind of helping that run production. I mean, my thing here, and I don't know if you know Haason Reddick's age off the top of your head, but I believe he is in his early 30s
I
versus,
believe
like you
he's
said,
30 exactly. I think he's
30
30.
exactly, versus Bryce Huff, who's three years younger.
Yeah,
You're betting on that youth and the fact of Bryce Huff continuing to develop. And the thing that I know, I've said this to you over text, multiple times. I don't know if I've ever mentioned it on the podcast, but it's like you'd rather be a year early on
yeah,
Haason Reddick and get something in return, even if it isn't necessarily as much as you thought it was going to be. And instead of being a year late and having no value and maybe his contract almost being inflated the way that, maybe you could say James Bradbury's is right now of,
right.
if you were to extend him and, have him under contract, then it's like, all right, well, you're either going to, have to cut him or, obviously that would also be a rapid drop in production, but it's not like we've never seen rapid drops of production from guys as they get up there in age. So like, I think at the end of the day, it's like one of those things where at least it's not like the Eagles, decided they couldn't afford to keep him. And at least they still kind of addressed that situation kind of proactively by, getting Huff and continuing to always kind of Howie Roseman always build through the trenches and just have depth at that position.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the most productive player is gone now, but yeah, I mean, I think the way Howie's approaching this offseason, that they're trying to get younger on defense because this past season, the Eagles had the fourth oldest defense. And, you know, Huff, obviously, like you said, 3 years younger. Nolan Smith still pretty young, still developing. So, and I mean, I'm expecting the secondary to get younger too, but we'll get into that a bit later. But yeah, it's just this team. Not to say that Hassan Reddick lost his step at all, but yeah, it made more sense to get something for him instead of nothing and letting him walk next season after this next season.
Yeah, and I mean, we got to get into some of these extensions a little bit, but a question I kind of want to ask you with this, I mean, and it kind of feeds into our theme of the episode today. Do you think this impacts the Eagles' draft strategy at all? Do they look at outside linebacker maybe a little bit earlier, or maybe just open their eyes to it if they hadn't at all in the past, or do you think they're pretty much set there at this point?
They might look at it. I want to say second round. But I don't think they go. The only scenario I see that happening in the first round is if they trade down. Um, but because it's a very deep corner class, lineman class, which are two pretty significant needs for the Eagles. So again, we'll get into that. But I think it maybe in terms of depth and in terms of development, yeah, they might go for a defensive end or outside linebacker a little earlier, but we'll see about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get into these extensions a little bit. Now, in our last episode, we talked about Landon Dickerson's extension. And since then, we've now had another offensive lineman get a big time extension, Jordan Mailata. And the Eagles also extend Reed Blankenship. I don't know if we discussed that at all yet.
I don't think
For
so.
some reason, I thought that we talked about that in our last episode, but I was just looking up when that happened. And I think it was, after our last episode. So, again, what are kind of your thoughts on these extensions? I guess we could start with the big one in Jordan Mailata.
Well, I think it makes sense because Mailata's been one of the, probably a top five left tackle in the league for the last couple seasons, I'd say. Only gave up 3 sacks last season. I mean, the dude, I mean, his story is just amazing, dude. Like, he was a rugby player, he didn't play a down of football until, uh, the Eagles drafted him, and it was more of a development, sort of like a project for Jeff Stoutland. I mean, in the
Yeah.
seventh round, I think he was drafted. And I mean, he's just been so good, 6'8". I mean, dude's a monster. And it's you have that left side now locked up for the next 4 seasons, 4 seasons now. So that's, I mean, offensive linemen are very important in this league, and especially with Mailata's been healthy, Dickerson's been healthy for the most part. So having those guys, those durable guys on that left side, the blind side of Jalen Hurts is going to be I mean, huge for the next few seasons. And I'm glad they got it done because he certainly deserved more money. I think he was a free agent after this coming season too, if I'm not mistaken. And this is a second big contract extension he's been given. But again, he deserves it. So I like the move.
Yeah, absolutely. I liked what he said too in his press conference about it too, where he was kind of like, look, like it's time to stop judging me as like this rugby player that's still learning the game. Like judge
Yeah.
me amongst the other best left tackles in the NFL. And I like that. And I mean, I think it shows you like the amount of confidence he has in his game too, that he feels he's up there with, the best left tackles in the sport. And I mean, I wouldn't, necessarily crown him the best left tackle like I would Lane Johnson. Lane Johnson's clearly, in my opinion, top three left right tackle in the NFL. Jordan
Yeah.
Mailata, I don't know if you could necessarily make that case without some pushback, but
Yeah.
I mean he's right up there with a lot of the top tackles in the league, and the Eagles lock him up, and Landon Dickerson's locked up, and while that offensive line has had some turnover with Kelsey obviously moving, and now Cam Jurgens is going to change positions, like it's got to feel good to have that left side secured and locked down for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, for sure. And also, he's now the fourth highest paid left tackle behind Laramie Tunsil, Trent Williams, and Andrew Thomas. I think that makes sense. I wouldn't have necessarily made him the highest paid left tackle, but
Yeah,
again, I wouldn't have been opposed necessarily because he's still got like he's a good player now, but I feel like he can still get even better, which is kind of scary to think about.
no doubt, no doubt. Yeah, I agree with that all 100%. So let's talk about Reed Blankenship now. I mean, a guy that came in last year, to a safety group that was really turned over, played solid, and the Eagles think it was, good enough to warrant a contract extension. So now they really kind of have the safety position locked up here, Ricardo, with CJ Gardner Johnson and Reed Blankenship. So were you surprised by this extension at all? And what are kind of your feelings on it?
I wouldn't say surprised. More of like he was going to be a restricted free agent after this coming season, so teams could have or they could have put a tender on him. But I think he's considering he was an undrafted free agent to where he is now. I mean, I sure it was a bit of an up and down season last year, but to me, he kind of reminds me of like Terrell Edmonds, like safety that the Steelers used to
Yeah,
have,
yeah,
and the Eagles had at one point. Kind of just like not necessarily flashy, but like just a solid all around player. He just does the job essentially. That's how I view Blankenship, and I mean he's still young. Like he's still gonna grow, and I think he'll get better, especially with C.J. Gardner Johnson back in the fold, back in the mix. They were a pretty good tandem. 2 seasons ago, so I expect him to get better, and I think he deserved the extension.
yeah. I think that's a great way you kind of phrase it, because it's like when you've got an Eagles defense that has budding stars or established stars all over it, whether it's Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis up front, or Darius Slay in the secondary, or Josh Sweat has been a regular 10 sack, double digit sack guy. It's like you need those guys that are gonna also like know their role, almost like the role players of a defense. And I think we saw the Steelers kind of do that with when they brought in Deshaun Elliott, the
Yeah,
former Dolphin safety. Like, and obviously Terrell Edmonds playing for both of our teams was kind of the epitome of that as well, where it's like you just need, not every single player on a team is going to be a star. You need guys that just come in and do your jobs. I think that's the perfect way to phrase that. And he is now locked up to do that for the Eagles here. So I don't, yeah, I guess surprise was kind of the wrong word for me to phrase it, but yeah, I mean the Eagles have kind of built a very solid safety group
yeah,
this offseason. Obviously they drafted Sidney Brown, who's still a developing player, and bringing back the consistent Reed Blankenship, and then CJ Gardner Johnson, who we know what he's done with Philadelphia in the past. That's rounded into a very good safety group right there, with just those three guys. So yeah, Eagles making moves, and yeah, I don't really have much more to add on that, unless you do. We could flip things over to kind of talking about the draft.
no, that's all I got, man. Yeah, let's
No,
do it. Let's go draft.
sounds good. We'll move it over. Let's flip things over to the Steelers, and then we'll come back to the Eagles. Um, so just talking about the Steelers and their draft preview a little bit. Just some things to note with just the way that the Steelers have kind of drafted early, with obviously the first through third rounds in the past. Here's an interesting stat. Every draft since 2010, which Mike Tomlin, I believe, took over the job in the 08-09 season, every draft since 2010, so basically Tomlin's whole tenure, the first round pick has had either Tomlin or the GM, obviously Omar Khan last year and Kevin Colbert before that, in attendance for that player's pro day. So maybe that gives you some insight as to, the trend of how the Steelers are going to be drafting in the first round. So, and in the past they've been to a lot of pro days, Tomlin and Colbert or Khan last year. This year they've only been to 4 pro days: Georgia, Clemson, Alabama, and Michigan. So maybe that kind of tells you that the first round pick is coming from one of those 4 schools.
That's so interesting. I mean, the more you say it now, the more convinced I am it is. Yeah, like I already had someone in mind, but I'm sure we'll talk about this a little later. But yeah, that only kind of justifies what I had in mind. But that's cool.
I mean, I guess we could kind of get into a little bit. I'll save some of my other notable prospects for later on. But I guess we could kind of get into the big board, or maybe I should preface it with just saying the positions I think the team's going to really try to address. I really like what they've done in free agency, and I think they've left themselves. There's a couple key glaring holes that are going to need to be addressed. There's no doubt about that, but it's almost like I almost feel better knowing, like, okay, there's like 3 or 4 positions that the Steelers need to address versus, all right, like they're kind of good everywhere, but like there's like 8 different positions I could see them using an upgrade. It's almost like very clear. Maybe it's just easier to predict what they're gonna do, but to me, the couple real key needs. I mean, number one, to me, everybody's making a big deal out of the wide receiver position, and who are they going to upgrade at right tackle? The biggest need, this team doesn't have somebody to snap the ball to Russell Wilson right now. Like their most experienced center is Herbig, and he's only played, I think, 60 snaps in the pros at center. So that's not what you're going to go into the season with next year. So I think that's definitely kind of the big need for this team. And I mean, like, the good thing for the Steelers, this is a deep class at center. So, they're going to be able to kind of have options, and even kind of looking into, even if they miss out on a center in the first or second round, there's going to be guys available in the third round where they have 2 picks that they could potentially, you feel a little bit worrisome knowing that, like, you're saving a guy that's potentially going to be your starter, waiting till the third round, or day 1 starter at center. But there's going to be options because this is a deep center class. So that's position priority number 1 for me. Number 2, I think I stay on the O-line. I've always been big that you got to build the O-line, and especially the way the Steelers and Arthur Smith are going to want to play football. That's where I think you got to go out and you got to get another tackle. And Omar Khan said in a press conference that he envisions Broderick Jones flipping over to the left side of the offensive line at some point. So you kind of look at right tackle for that as being, to me, position need number 2. From there, that's when I think you get into some of the positions like wide receiver. They need another wide receiver. Obviously, the Steelers have been very good at drafting wide receivers a little bit in later rounds. Their most recent wide receiver pick was George Pickens and Calvin Austin, who they drafted in the 2nd and 4th round, I believe, in the same draft. And then I think the other 2 positions I would like for them to address at some point is definitely corner. They're a little bit thin in the secondary, specifically at corner. They don't really have a slot corner on their roster right now. Right now, it's kind of listed as Darius Rush, but I don't know if you necessarily want to go. I believe he was a late round pick or an undrafted pick last year, and he didn't even start the season with the Steelers. He was cut, and the Steelers signed him. And then, and then to me, the D line is a position that continues to get older with Cam Hayward getting up there in age. Larry Ogunjobi hasn't really lived up to his contract. You kind of hit last year with Keanu Benton. I wouldn't mind them kind of going back to the well with a mid to late round pick and adding some more, adding another player there to the interior defensive line. So those to me are kind of the 5 biggest priority positions for the Steelers. Do you kind of agree with that? Anything else you think I left out?
No, I completely agree with though. I mean, the first 2 especially, those are such obvious holes that they need to fill. I mean, excuse me, the center. I mean, in theory, you could sign the Dolphins' Connor Williams, but again, he's coming back from an injury. But you also
Yeah.
don't want to have to wait and have someone like sub in for him. But yeah, I think the Steelers have to go O line first round or like second, maybe back to back. I don't know, but they certainly have to build from the trenches. It has to be addressed early on.
No doubt. And I mean, I don't remember where I read this. Maybe it was Steeler Depot, but I was reading about how like they may bring back Patrick Peterson after the draft, which I'm totally in favor of, just as a veteran
Yeah.
presence with some versatility. Move him inside and have him play slot corner. But the other name that was listed was bringing back Mason Cole after the draft too, which like isn't
Yeah.
really ideal for me. But like Ricardo, if they wait to take a center until like the third or fourth round, like I'd feel better bringing back Mason Cole so that the center that they draft in a mid round doesn't have to play right away. So while I don't want that to be the situation, I want them to take a center in the first two rounds. There's really two guys at center that I have my eye on that I'd really like, and then after that, it's kind of more settling for a mid round pick. But if that's not the case, I could see that being a situation.
Ugh, man, that would be, yeah, I guess so. But in that case, I feel like if they were to miss out on a center early on, they would have to go right tackle or offensive tackle, right? Like it has to be.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
that's what I think almost the most likely situation is them going back-to-back offensive linemen in the first and second round if they don't, trade their picks around at all. Um, I could see them potentially trading back from their first round pick to a
mm,
later first round pick just because one of the prospects I'm going to get into that I think they've been tied to a little bit um, is kind of in a no man's land with their first and second round pick of like he's probably going to go either late first or early second. And I guess we can kind of get into the big board here in a second. But if they stand pat there with those two first round picks, I expect it to be, kind of, back to back offensive linemen. Or if all the centers are off the board, maybe that's the only situation they pivot. But I think they're definitely addressing offensive line early and often in this draft.
yeah, they have to. But yeah, well, no, let's get into this big one. I'm curious to see like who you have.
Okay,
This
yeah. So again, I kind of did this big board not with like the top prospects. So I gave my top 8 of guys the Steelers have either been linked to. Obviously this leaned heavy towards the pro day tracker of,
yeah,
obviously those 4 schools that Tomlin and Khan have been to. Plus I kind of took into account guys that they've had top 30 visits with of note from like other schools or from those 4 schools. And then also guys that have just kind of been linked to it. So this isn't necessarily what I would do,
yeah,
or what my big board is. This is what I'm just kind of expecting. And I think the name that I kind of see as most likely would be, number one, I kind of have Amarius Mims from Georgia,
yeah,
going back to back Georgia tackles. Would not surprise me for the Steelers. Tomlin has the Steelers have, always kind of had a connection with going to Georgia Pro Days and, taking Broderick Jones last year and taking Darnell Washington last year. Would not shock me if they go back to that well again this season.
yeah. It wouldn't shock me either. And he's I can't remember what he's ranked like positionally in terms of tackles, but I know he's at least top 5. I
Yeah,
think I actually saw him even mocked in the second round, which is interesting. I don't know
yeah,
why that like, and I forget whose draft it was, but I was looking yesterday and I saw it was like a very recent mock draft. So I don't know if that could, that sort of range of like 20s of the first round to like early second. I don't know if that maybe the Steelers move back a little bit for value's sake, but that would be
yeah.
that's kind of what I had in mind too for the Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes a lot of sense. And I mean, I'm going to kind of stay with this theme here of, these pro days. Alabama was another one they went to. And that's where J.C. Latham comes in, who's
Yeah,
another offensive tackle. And it's kind of one of those things where you just got to wonder, like, where's the run on tackles going to be
yeah,
compared to where the Steelers are picking in the first round. And it's really going to be, to me, not necessarily that anybody falls, but it's just like who's still available at that point and is it the right fit for the Steelers? So, those were kind of the top 2 that I saw because I believe they've had both guys in for a top 30 visit, and they've obviously been to the pro day of both guys. Both of them offensive linemen. It just makes sense that if those guys are available, I could definitely see the Steelers going that route.
yeah. I could too. I just think Latham might get drafted a little earlier based off of all the mocks I've been seeing. So that might be a
Yeah.
scenario where you have to trade up a few
Yeah.
spots. But
Yeah.
again, it really does depend on the run of tackle because last year it was the same thing. The Steelers had to trade up
To get Broderick
because
Jones,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly,
Now
because
it
there was
wasn't as deep. It wasn't as deep last year. The tackle class, it felt like there was less first rounders, and Broderick Jones was kind of the last one that the
yeah,
Steelers had to move up. But yeah, and I don't really see the Steelers. You never know if there's a guy that they just fall in love there that they want to move up for. They'll go
yeah,
ahead and do it, but I don't know if because of how much deeper it is. I mean, there's guys like Joe Alt from Notre Dame. Um,
right.
I think I forget I never know how to pronounce the guy's name from Penn State, but like there's
Oh yeah,
prospects out there that the Steelers haven't really been linked to at all that I could see them, going early as well. I'll kind of rattle off my next three
hmm
players that are all offensive linemen that are kind of next up on my big board here. Actually, excuse me, it's just two offensive linemen, but it's uh Talise Fuanga from Oregon State, who the Steelers
yeah,
have had in for a top 30 visit, and Graham Barton, center, a guy who's I believe he's declaring as a tackle, but the expectation is that he moves into center at the next level. So that's where we kind of get the first center on the board there. So both guys that again, kind of the same logic of like offensive line. How are you building, or what's the expectation of how the Steelers are looking to, go about building through this draft? So those are kind of the next two that I have on this list.
yeah. That's those two names also make sense. Although I'm a little surprised you don't have Oregon center Jackson Power. What's his name? Jackson Power Johnson, I
Jackson
believe
Powers
it is.
Johnson.
Yeah,
So my reasoning with that is that the Steelers, um, again, Con and Tomlin didn't go to his pro day, and they haven't had him in for a top 30 visit. I mean,
right, right.
again, maybe this is a year that they break tradition because they've gone to so few pro days. Those two guys specifically, they did have, another personnel go to the Oregon pro day, but it's like I'm just trying to read the tea leaves a little bit, and it feels
Yeah,
like Graham Barton may be the guy that they like a little bit more there. Now, again, they haven't been to his pro day, but I believe they do have a top 30 visit scheduled with him. So, just stuff that I'm kind of keeping in mind, and yeah, again, just kind of keeping with that theme of offensive line kind of as the main priority here. But we'll get into a couple guys in the secondary that were my 5, 6, 7. And that was Nate Wiggins, the corner from Clemson,
yeah,
Terry and Arnold, the corner from Alabama, and Kool-Aid McKinstry, another corner from Alabama. Again,
yeah,
Clemson and Alabama, two of the schools that the Steelers, Con and Tomlin, went to the pro day for. And, I talked about how secondary is another kind of priority to me for what the Steelers are going to try and do here. So, take the order however you want. But I could see if the offensive linemen that the Steelers had their eye on are gone, and if the Steelers are going to go to a position other than O-line in the first round, I'd have to imagine it would be corner.
I think so too because it's also a deep class then, and I think if there's a run on one position, there might not necessarily be a run on the other, if that makes sense. Because
Yeah,
teams need different positions and things. So, but the thing that wouldn't surprise me just generally is, Omar Khan has shown he'll be aggressive. In trades and even on draft day, like he had to trade up for Broderick Jones.
yeah,
Um, when there's a guy, it kind of, I always say this, but like I just see the similarity between him and Howie Roseman. When he sees a guy, I feel like he's gonna go and get him, even like
yeah,
if within reason, obviously.
yeah,
But
yeah,
so I see, yeah, I think I agree with you in the sense that I think it's gonna be O line no matter what, unless that situation happens where there's a run and none of the guys they want are there, then they go corner. I think that definitely makes sense because that's still a big need for them. And it would be nice to have someone, to pair out on the opposite side of Joey Porter Jr., who's obviously shown a lot of promise. He showed a lot of promise last season. So,
yeah. I mean, and I think, like I said, yeah, corner is a position that I see them addressing, and yeah, I agree with your logic on the aggressiveness of Khan as well. So I'll kind of get into my last player here, and this one is kind of a favorite of mine, and this is the guy I was referring to. That's kind of in no man's land between the Steelers' first round pick and the Steelers' second round pick, or where I think he's going to get drafted. That's Zach Frazier, the center out of West Virginia. Um, I like him a lot. I think he brings kind of that Steelers mentality and really a guy that's really all about the team from everything I've read about his playing days at West Virginia. Um, the only interesting thing is I've read him, having a lot of links to the Steelers, and multiple Steelers beat writers seem to think that this guy is, going to be a Pittsburgh Steeler. But he, so the Big 12 had like their own Big 12 pro day. They didn't have the schools
Yeah,
do individual pro days. Khan and Tomlin weren't at that, but I don't know if that had anything to do with that reasoning behind it. And I also don't think they've had a formal visit with him. So that's where it kind of gets into those one of those things where it's like I don't see them reaching for him in the first round at
yeah,
pick 20. So if he's there in the second round, maybe he's the guy. He's a guy that I like a lot, but I don't know if there's a ton of flags pointing to him, but for whatever reason, I've read a lot of things that the Steelers seem to have an interest in him from different beat writers. So he's a guy that I kept on the board, and I mean I would like to see him in black and gold, but again, there'd have to be some situations that happen with it because he's kind of mocked to go like early second round, kind of like I said, no man's land for the Steelers.
yeah. I mean, they could, yeah, probably trade down in that case. I don't know if that means trading out of the first round entirely. Maybe not, but um, in terms of value, it definitely makes more sense to trade down instead of reaching for him. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's an interesting name too.
And it's like maybe I wonder if that's one of those things. They have 2 third-round picks. Maybe they use one of them to trade up a little bit in the second round.
Yeah,
Um, I will say, even though he hasn't been in for a visit yet, and they didn't even interview him at the combine, which was kind of weird, but they did schedule him for a top 30 prospect visit that hasn't happened yet. So expect that to happen here at some point. But that's kind of my big board for the first round, Ricardo. And there's some other names. If you want me to give you some wide receivers that I could see them going for, if they decide to go wide receiver in the second round, I think Roman Wilson out of Michigan is a guy to keep an eye on. Um,
mhm,
been to his the Khan and Tomlin have been to his pro day. Wouldn't really shock me the 2 wide receivers out of Georgia. I mean, Ladd McConkey, I think, is projected to go kind of in the late first round a little bit too, from what I've seen.
yeah,
But he's named to keep an eye on, and then also the other wide receiver, Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint out of Georgia, and then Cornelius Johnson from Michigan as well. All names to keep an eye on at the wide receiver position. I didn't really go deep into the D line, the interior D line,
yeah,
because I expect that to be more mid round pick.
mhm,
And then the one other name that wouldn't shock me if the Steelers hold off on center until the third round, look out for Cedric Van Pran out of Georgia. Again, that Georgia connection with the
yeah,
Steelers. A guy that's probably going to go around, early third round. Kind of that middle area there. I see him still as a late day 2 guy. That's where the Steelers could potentially look to go if they avoid the center in the first 2 rounds. So that's kind of everything I got as far as the Steelers kind of pre-draft expectations. But if I had to make one prediction about who that first round pick is going to be, I think I'd go with Amarius Mims, the right tackle out of Georgia. And then that shifts Broderick Jones back over to his natural position of left tackle once Mims is ready. I think Mims has even played less games than Broderick Jones played as a starter coming out of
yeah,
college. So
mhm,
it'd be some
definitely.
inexperience, but again, you're kind of drafting for the development with those picks.
Yeah, growing pains, that's part of it. I mean, a rookie's always going to struggle anyway, but I mean,
Yeah.
just the talent is there. So, and that to me makes the most sense and where he should be going around that range. So I
Yeah.
wouldn't be shocked if that's how it ended up. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So let's shift things over to the Eagles now, man, and talk about their draft preview, draft expectations a little bit. And I'll kind of let you take it, the direction that you want here off the top.
yeah. So the biggest needs for the Eagles, I mean, I'm just gonna say right now, they're every like it seems like every single mock has the Eagles taking a corner,
It
and
really does.
it's like, is it really that obvious though? Like, I know James Bradbury's and Darius Slayer up there in age, um, but like you still have the likes of Keely Ringo there. I mean, they just re-signed Avonte Maddox, probably not your long-term solution, but still, he's on the younger side. Um, I mean, I guess you could probably address it. I think it's going to be the first two rounds, but the thing that wouldn't shock me either is if the Eagles also went with an offensive lineman, not necessarily a
Uh-huh.
center, but to me, it's like Howie Roseman. I feel like he drafts yes to win now, but also thinks about the future. And in that sense, I think maybe they go offensive tackle in the first round because Lane Johnson, I'm not sure how many seasons he has left. I think he's a free agent when he turns 36, and I think that's 2 seasons. Um, so to me, that could be something that Roseman ends up doing, but I can't not pick a corner in this. The Eagles taking one. I think they're gonna end up taking one because again, it is I guess a pretty big need. So the names you kind of already said a handful of them: Kool Aid McKinstry from Bama, Nate Wiggins, Clemson. He's been a very popular pick for the Eagles. Cooper DeJean has been an interesting one. From Iowa, he's gotten so much hype. What was the one video? I can't remember what it was. It's some like jump he did, I think.
Yeah.
Um, it was something crazy. But his pro day, excuse me, was I think he was like 4.4 40 time. I mean, he's a pretty good athlete too. That I don't know if they would do, but Terrion Arnold, that would be amazing if he was still there at 22, which the Eagles have. I don't think he will be, but uh,
Yeah, I mean
that's
Terry, and that's kind of the same thing I was feeling with the Steelers. Is it's like I threw his name out there, but a lot of these mocks I've seen, he's like one of the first corners, if not the first off the board.
exactly. So it probably goes sooner. But to me, I think it comes down to one of two players, Nate Wiggins from Clemson and Kool Aid McKinstry, I think. But I think the better prospect is Wiggins, just because he's faster and he's also a little taller, a couple inches taller than McKinstry is. As sick as it would be to have Kool Aid because of his name on the team, I just think
Yeah,
Wiggins is a better prospect, and just from stuff I've been reading. But he probably Wiggins needs to build a little muscle, but just kind of a smaller frame, which the Eagles haven't been afraid to do. Devontae Smith is the clearest example there. Not exactly the strongest guy or the most muscular dude, but he's still a very good player. So I wouldn't be shocked if they went in that direction first round. If for some reason all these corners are gone, I think the Eagles would go offensive tackle, like I said. JC Latham, if he's potentially still there, he might not be. Um, I've seen Tyler Guyton, which is interesting, but he's been mocked a ton of play. Like he's been as early as the 20s of the first round or as late as mid second round. So
yeah,
that's an interesting. That might be a trade down scenario. But I also they've been linked to Jackson Powers Johnson. I don't. I'm not. I wouldn't be thrilled with that. That's probably. I mean, again, you're already moving Cam Jurgens back to center. I don't think they would draft a center and then change their mind. You know what I mean? Like moving back
yeah,
to right guard. Although I don't know that's center's not. I'm not ruling center out or interior offensive line out
yeah,
because right guard position is very clearly still up for grabs. Right tackle. Um, but I mean, I've seen the likes of also edge rusher could be addressed. Um, Latu from UCLA. I don't know how you say his name.
yeah,
I'm horrible with that, but Chop Robinson too from Penn State. Those are some names that could potentially be in there for the Eagles in play. I think those are also more trade downs, but if I had to guess, it's going corner and offensive tackle. And I think it's back to back round because either way, I think the Eagles are going to address, if it's not the first round, they're going to address offensive tackle the second because they always do this every
yeah,
single year. It's always one of the first, you know, 3 rounds the Eagles will draft an offensive lineman. And he might not play right away, but they don't need him to necessarily either. So, and with Jeff Stoutland there, I mean, one of the very best offensive line coach there. He's just very good at developing these kind of later picks as well. So I think it goes corner, offensive tackle, second round. They have 2 second rounders actually within 4 picks of each other. and I wouldn't be shocked if one of those is probably traded away because they don't have a third rounder, and I think they have 3 fifth rounders, which that's not going to change either. I mean, that's not going to stay that way either. So, I think those are the three. I mean, edge rusher would probably be my third
Uh-huh.
bet on that.
Um, yeah, I have a couple thoughts there. One of them is with oh man, I just forgot. I had one come up there right at the end with what you were saying, but I'll go to the other one that I kind of had stored in my brain. But just my mind was kind of, when I was looking at the Steelers, notable top 30 visits and everything like that. I also took a look at the Eagles, and I don't know if they have the same track record with the top 30 visits or with pro days and everything like that the Steelers necessarily do. But just worth of note of some of the prospects you kind of talked about there that the Eagles could potentially target in the first round. Um, at corner, Cooper DeJean is the only guy you mentioned that they've had in for a top 30 visit.
Yeah,
Um,
that's true.
and then for the edge, Laitu Latu, Chop Robinson have both been in, and Tyler Guyton, which is that interesting one of like what's going to be the range there. He's been in for a top 30 visit as well. And then the other thought I had too, when you talk about the way that they're kind of could address right tackle, if the Steelers pass on him, Amarius Mims almost makes sense because, you have
That's
to
yeah.
imagine he needs some development time, having only started 8 games in his college career. And who better to sit behind than Lane Johnson with Jeff Stoutland as your coach as well? That could definitely be a development piece for, a year or two down the road or whenever Lane Johnson decides to hang it up.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I wouldn't actually be opposed to that because again, that's planning for the future, but also, I mean, yeah, you wouldn't have to see him right away either. So, I
Yeah.
again, I think the Eagles can afford to do that because there's not necessarily a glaring hole on this roster. Like I think they're solid all around. I mean, yeah, like I said, and Howie Roseman said this, they need more speed on defense. So that's why I think they're going to go corner first round. I mean,
Yeah.
At some point, Bradbury's probably going to get caught and moved on because, and I still think there's a chance they could move on from him, make him a post June 1st cut, but maybe it's too late for that. I don't know, but I think corner definitely has to be the way to go. If you're saying you're trying to get younger on defense, then I'd say you stick by it, stick with it, and really, get someone who can potentially be that corner for the future because Darius Slay is obviously not going to be around for more than another 2 seasons. So
Yeah.
that's how I envision it playing out. The thing that would shock me is if they went receiver, which I really hope not, because in that case, I think it means they might move on from AJ Brown
Yeah.
after next season because they
Yeah.
can afford to and cap space. They can free up a good amount of it. So I hope they don't go that route. That's the one scenario I would not be happy with. If it's corner or tackle, I'm fine with it. I'm cool with it. That's good with me. And then I think they can also just wait till the later rounds to get a receiver,
Yeah.
because it's such a deep class. So
Well, I was going to ask you specifically with wide receiver that you kind of talked about, and then also two other positions that I think they have an underlying need at. Again, not sort of pressing, but sort of the way the Steelers need a D lineman. I think that the Eagles maybe do you think that they look at inside linebacker at all at some point in the middle rounds?
I would say middle rounds definitely. I mean, maybe if they trade one of those second round picks, they go with and maybe get like a third rounder in return. They get the likes of like Jeremiah Trotter Jr., who obviously his dad played with the Eagles. So that'd be
Mhm.
kind of a cool story. But yeah, that wouldn't hurt. I don't think they address it any earlier than the third round. Like that's definitely a mid round sort of thing. Same with defensive tackle because it's not a very deep class in either of those positions. So that to me is more mid round sort of thing, unless there's someone they're really in love with that they think is worth the second round pick. But I just don't see that happening. It's to me, yeah, it's playing out corner and first or offensive lineman first. It's going one of those two ways, like
Yeah.
corner, offensive lineman, corner first round, and then whatever you want to do with that second round or the other second rounder is probably receiver, probably a playmaker. I wouldn't rule out tight end either. Um,
Yeah, that's fair.
that's because Dallas Goddard's a free agent after this year, and they still, I mean, Jack Stoll is with the Giants now. Grant Calcaterra is not exactly great, but I think tight end will get addressed. I actually wouldn't be shocked if it's a second rounder that they use it on, or they trade one of those and use a third round pick on it, because I think that makes sense too. They need more depth there. With Dallas Goedert also kind of having an injury history, um, it wouldn't hurt to address it in like the day two potentially, but not with that first second rounder. I don't know, that'll be interesting to see what they do with one of those 2 seconds, because I don't think they're going to keep them both or use them both.
Yeah. Now, I'm curious too. Do you see a scenario where, because I know that you kind of expect it to be kind of tackle and looking to the future, and I know that you're, pretty confident for the, realistically confident in Tyler Steen to take over at guard. But do you see a situation where they go corner and then maybe guard in the second round?
A guard, I mean, at that point, I think ah they could. I wouldn't be thrilled about it, but I think that also would mean, yeah, Tyler Steen's not exactly developing like as well as he should, or like he's not. I don't know. That would be a bummer in that sense, because I like Steen in the limited time he played. He looked solid. Obviously,
Yeah.
showed like he showed promise. So for him, if he were not to take that starting job, that would be a huge disappointment.
Yeah.
But I guess I can't rule that out either. But I would be a little surprised if they went with a guard in the second round, say.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's fair, but just another one of those positions I was looking at as, potentially could be a way that the Eagles go because, obviously you I think you're higher on Tyler Steen than I've necessarily thought. But maybe it's
Yeah,
also just me looking at it from, a Steelers perspective of like a former third round pick that, you was drafted kind of as a tackle, Chukuma Okorafor PTSD. That I
yeah,
kind of am like, look, if there's a guy there that you can, have faith to come in and start right away or pretty soon there, maybe go take him. But if
yeah.
Steen develops the way that you hope, then yeah, he could be the guy there. And then you don't really have to worry about that, and you can just plan for the future. But sounds good. So where do you kind of is your? Did you say your first round pick expectation is Nate Wiggins?
Um, yeah, I would say so. Yeah, if it's not Wiggins, then it's McKinstry, but it's one of those two. I feel like,
Uh huh.
uh, and then offensive lineman second round. That's
Okay.
I feel like, yeah, that has to go that way or the other way.
Gotcha,
It's
man.
yeah.
Yeah, it's coming up soon here. Let's just while we get ready to close this thing out. Do you have any other big kind of expectations or kind of like surprises you think you could see happening in this first round? Anything that, maybe necessarily isn't being discussed that you could see happening with
Like
any of the
just
teams,
oh, with any, okay.
just in general, just
Um,
in the first round draft.
I mean, it's I'm curious to see where JJ McCarthy ends up,
Uh-huh.
because I mean, there's I feel like it's a very polarizing prospect.
Yeah.
Just because, like, obviously with Michigan, they won the whole thing, the championship and all, but he didn't really do much, and it's just the quarterback run is going to be so this is like the what was the quarter, was it Trubisky, it reminds me of the Trevor Lawrence, I think it was, draft class, or
Oh
which
yeah.
draft class had the most, because that's going to be like such a huge, like, it's obviously going to be huge, like if the Vikings straight up or the Raiders straight up, maybe the Broncos straight up, there's so many trade scenarios. There's so many possibilities. The Patriots might not even take a quarterback. They might trade down. There's so many possibilities. It's so fascinating. But I guess it'll be interesting to see if, like, who takes what and where, what spots. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm excited for that. And me personally, I would laugh if the Giants took JJ McCarthy. I would actually be hysterical, but I don't think he's that good. But maybe that's just the
It,
hater in
it
me. And
it's like I my thing with JJ McCarthy that I wonder is like the hype that he's been getting. Like last year, as we got closer to the draft, Will Levis just continued to get more and more hype, and eventually push came to shove, and he went in the second round. Like I'm
yeah,
not expecting that kind of a fall from JJ McCarthy, but like people saying he's the third best quarterback in this draft, and is he going to end up going outside the top 10 or something like that? That's what I kind of am curious of what's going to happen there. And I think just in general, like, there's a chance we could see 6 quarterbacks go in the first round. I mean, Bo Nix and Michael Penix are kind of more the wild cards of where are they going to go. But would it blow my mind if, there's 4 quarterbacks taken in the top 10, Bo Nix goes around 15 or goes to the Broncos. I believe the Broncos are picking 19. And then a team takes, Michael Penix at the end of the first round. Like, that wouldn't shock me.
That would be so fast. I mean, it's just quarterbacks always will get the headlines, all that, the mock drafts and all the news. But like, what happens after that is also just as fascinating because you would assume it's Marvin Harrison Jr. going, the first
Yeah.
non QB going first, and
Yeah.
hopefully, I mean, and then it's the receiver run. It's like such a deep receiver class, tackle class. Like there
Yeah.
could just be a run. That's why I'm like excited, especially excited because this year it feels like there's going to be even more trades than the last couple last couple of drafts. So it's just like once there's a run, teams are gonna move. Like they're not gonna just stand there or sit there
Yeah.
and like they're gonna be aggressive. And
And it's
yeah,
it's honestly good for both of our teams that have needs along the offensive line and at secondary at cornerback that, there is going to be potentially a lot of quarterbacks that go early on, a lot of wide receiver skill position players that are going to go early on.
yeah,
And there's a world where we get to the top 10 and not a single offensive lineman has it's very realistic. The top 10 could be all quarterbacks, wide receivers, and let's say an edge rusher. There could be no corners or offensive linemen taken in the top 10.
yeah. Well, what's his name? Dallas Turner, I think, is like the best defensive prospect, and I think in any other drafts he'd probably be like top 5, and he might even not even go in the top 10. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's like crazy to me, but yeah, it just shows you how much depth there is in this, how much skill there is in this draft. It's just I'm really excited to see how it shakes out. But our
Yeah.
teams, I'm not worried about our teams because I think when push comes to shove, they're gonna get the players they want. So
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, yeah,
100%. And they're positioned in good spots for what their needs are, combined with what the available talent's going to be.
yeah.
So they're sitting pretty. Another question I'll ask you: second overall pick, Jaden Daniels or Drake May?
Oh man. um. Oh man, because I think Jaden Daniels has more upside. Like I just, but I think that also means he has more bust potential. And I think it's the Commanders, right, or the second
Yeah,
pick, right? Yeah.
Commanders.
So I hope it's Drake May because I like Jaden Daniels more. If that makes sense, I don't want.
Yeah,
I'm
that
scared
does
the
make sense.
Commanders are going to ruin, like kind of mess up his Jaden Daniels' potential. So
Yeah, I
I
mean, you also don't want to root. You don't want to have to root for
yeah,
a guy that's a division rival.
exactly. So
Yeah.
I think it should be Jaden Daniels, but I hope it's Drake May, if that
I
makes
fully
sense.
I fully expect it to be Jaden Daniels, dude. I'd be shocked if it's actually Drake May.
That's what I'm saying. Like he just won the like highs. Like, come on, like really? It's not hard. Like, and then also with the
Yeah.
league being more mobile QBs and all, it makes
Yeah.
more sense. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think I'm kind of with you on that. Yeah, definitely going to be exciting to see how this all kind of goes and how it all shakes out. And yeah, like we said off the top, it's getting right down to it. We got about 2 weeks to go. 2 weeks from Thursday, round 1 is going to kick off. So it'll be here before we know it. But as we wrap things up, Ricardo, any final thoughts that you have for us here?
Let's. I don't know. Let's just hope for a good draft for us for our teams, and I'm sure they will be because our GMs will get what they want. That's how it
Yeah.
goes.
They they will indeed. They will indeed. At least we can continue to hope so. We'll be back most likely after the draft to break down the new players on both the Steelers and Eagles. So until then, everybody take care, and we will see you next time. Peace out. Bye.